What's a ghetto rat like you doing in this neighborhood anyway? Officer Bradley Henderson's words slice through the quiet suburban afternoon as he leans down to Samantha Williams' car window. His sneer is visible even through the dashboard camera footage. Samantha's hands remain perfectly still on the steering wheel. Officer, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Don't you dare lecture me! Henderson cuts her off, his voice rising. He slams his palm against the car roof, the metallic bang echoing down the street. Get out! Hands where I can see them. His partner Mills takes a step back, clearly uncomfortable, but says nothing as Henderson yanks the car door open with unnecessary force. What Officer Henderson didn't know was that he had just made the biggest mistake of his career. This traffic stop would expose a corruption scandal, overturn 23 wrongful convictions, and destroy everything he thought he knew about power. Have you ever witnessed someone abuse their authority and felt completely helpless to stop it? Samantha Williams had been driving for exactly 17 minutes when the red and blue lights appeared in her rearview mirror. She was heading to what she had described to her colleagues as the most important meeting of her career, a phrase that would prove more accurate than anyone could imagine. At 34, Samantha carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned her place in a world that didn't always welcome her. Her navy blazer was perfectly pressed, her credentials organized in a leather portfolio on the passenger seat. The government fleet vehicle she drove bore license plates that most people wouldn't recognize, but trained eyes would notice the federal designation buried in the small print. She pulled over immediately, following protocol she knew better than most. As she waited, she glanced at her phone. A text message reading, "Operation Green Light. Status update required by 1500 hours," glowed on the screen. She checked the time. 2:47 p.m. 13 minutes to spare. Officer Bradley Henderson had been patrolling this stretch of suburban Detroit for 12 years. His personnel file, thick with citizen complaints, told a story that Internal Affairs had somehow managed to overlook repeatedly. Traffic stops in affluent neighborhoods, searches that yielded convenient discoveries, arrest reports with suspicious similarities in language and circumstances. His partner for the past 6 months, Officer Robert Mills, had grown increasingly uncomfortable with Henderson's methods. Mills was young, idealistic, still believing the oath he'd taken to serve and protect meant something. He'd started documenting concerns in his personal notes, though he hadn't yet found the courage to report them formally. "Another one thinking she belongs here," Henderson muttered as he approached Samantha's vehicle, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. Mills followed reluctantly, his stomach already knotting with the familiar dread that accompanied Henderson's traffic stops. The dashboard camera in their patrol car recorded everything, as did the body cameras both officers wore. What the cameras wouldn't capture was Henderson's practiced movement, a sleight of hand he'd perfected over years of planting evidence. The small plastic baggie in his pocket contained just enough cocaine to justify an arrest, just enough to ruin someone's life. Samantha watched Henderson approach in her side mirror. His swagger, the deliberate intimidation in his posture, the way he kept his hand near his weapon, she'd seen it all before. What Henderson couldn't know was that she'd been studying officers exactly like him for the past 8 months. Her phone buzzed again. This time, the message was from a number that would make Henderson's blood run cold if he knew what it meant. "Agent Williams, target location confirmed. Proceed with caution. Federal backup standing by." As Henderson reached her window, Samantha made a mental note of everything. His aggressive approach, his partner's obvious discomfort, the way Henderson's eyes immediately went to her purse, her phone, calculating what story he could craft. She'd seen this movie before. She knew how it usually ended, but today would be different. Henderson's radio crackled with routine chatter from dispatch. What dispatch didn't know was that federal agents were already monitoring police communications in this district. The investigation that had brought Samantha here had been months in the making, triggered by a pattern of arrests that had caught the attention of someone much higher up the food chain than Henderson could imagine. "Vehicle registration shows government fleet status," Mills noted quietly, reading from his tablet as they approached. Henderson waved him off. Probably some clerk from the city planning office thinking she's important. His dismissive laugh carried the weight of 12 years of unchecked authority. In her car, Samantha's phone showed 17 missed calls from a federal number. Her backup team was getting anxious. The operation she was supposed to oversee was critical, a multi-agency drug bust that would culminate months of surveillance. But first, she had to get through this traffic stop without blowing her cover. What none of them realized was that this routine traffic stop was about to become the thread that would unravel everything. Henderson's pattern of corruption, carefully hidden for over a decade, was about to collide with federal justice in a way that would make headlines across the country. As Henderson's fingers drummed against his weapon and his practiced sneer spread across his face, he had no idea that the woman in the car wasn't just another target. She was the hunter, and he had just walked into her trap. The clock on Samantha's dashboard read 2:51 p.m. In exactly 9 minutes, her absence from the federal operation would trigger a chain of events that would bring this entire house of cards crashing down. "License and registration," Henderson demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. His tone carried the weight of assumed authority, the voice of someone who had never been challenged. Samantha reached slowly for her glove compartment, her movements deliberate and visible. "May I ask the reason for the stop, officer?" "You may not." Henderson's response was sharp, dismissive. "Just hand over your documents and keep your mouth shut." Mills shifted uncomfortably behind his partner, recognizing the familiar pattern. This wasn't about traffic violations. This was about control, about power, about putting someone in their place. He'd seen it dozens of times before, but something about this stop felt different. The woman in the car remained unnaturally calm, almost as if she'd been expecting this. Samantha handed over her license and registration through the window. Henderson snatched them without looking at her face, but when he glanced at the documents, something made him pause. The registration showed a government fleet designation. The license listed an address that was clearly not in this neighborhood. "What's someone like you doing driving a government vehicle?" Henderson's question dripped with suspicion and something darker. "I work for the federal government," Samantha replied evenly. Her voice carried no defensiveness, no fear, just facts. Henderson's laugh was cold and mocking. "Sure you do. And I'm the president." He handed the documents back with unnecessary force. "Step out of the vehicle." "I smell marijuana." Mills frowned. He was standing close enough to know there was no smell of marijuana. His partner was lying, and they both knew it. But Mills had learned over the past 6 months that questioning Henderson in the moment only made things worse. "Officer, I haven't been smoking anything," Samantha said, her voice remaining steady despite the escalating situation. "I don't consent to a search of my vehicle." Henderson's face darkened. The phrase, "I don't consent," was like a red flag to him. In his experience, only guilty people refused searches. Only people with something to hide knew their rights well enough to invoke them. "Don't you dare quote the Constitution to me," Henderson snarled, moving closer to the window. "I've been doing this job since before you were even in high school. When I say I smell marijuana, I smell marijuana." He turned to Mills with exaggerated authority. "Mills, you smell that too, right?" Mills felt the familiar knot in his stomach tighten. This was the moment that had been coming for months, the moment when he'd have to choose between his conscience and his career. He looked at his partner, then at the woman in the car who was watching him with an expression that seemed almost knowing. I don't smell anything, Henderson," Mills said quietly. Henderson's face flushed red. "What did you say?" "I said I don't smell marijuana," Mills repeated, his voice slightly stronger. "Then maybe you need to get your nose checked," Henderson snapped. "Or maybe you need to remember who's the senior officer here." Samantha watched this exchange with growing interest. The dynamic between the two officers was exactly what she'd been briefed to look for. a veteran officer with questionable methods and a younger partner struggling with his conscience. This was textbook corruption in action. "Officer," she tried again, "I really need to ask that you contact your supervisor. I have an important federal meeting that I cannot miss." Henderson exploded. "Federal meeting? Federal meeting?" His voice rose to a near shout. "Lady, the only meeting you're going to have is with a jail cell if you don't shut your mouth and step out of this car right now." He yanked on the door handle, pulling it open with such force that Samantha had to grip the steering wheel to keep from being thrown off balance. "Hands where I can see them." "Move slowly." As Samantha stepped out of the vehicle, Henderson immediately spun her around and pressed her against the car. The hot metal of the hood burned through her blazer as he forced her down. "Spread your legs." Arms up. His hands moved roughly across her body in what could barely be called a professional pat-down. "What's this?" He found her phone and immediately pulled it from her pocket. The phone screen lit up with notifications, multiple missed calls from the same federal number, text messages with urgent timestamps. Henderson glanced at the screen and saw words that should have given him pause. Federal operation, agent status, backup required. But Henderson was too deep in his routine to process what he was seeing. In his mind, this was just another drug dealer with a fancy phone, trying to look important. "Real fancy phone for someone from the ghetto," he said, tossing it onto the ground next to her keys and wallet. Mills watched in growing horror as his partner's behavior escalated beyond anything he'd witnessed before. The woman wasn't resisting, wasn't fighting back, wasn't even protesting loudly. She was letting it happen, almost as if she was documenting it. "Henderson, maybe we should call this in," Mills suggested weakly. "Call what in? A routine traffic stop?" Henderson was already moving toward the car. "I'm going to search this vehicle, and I'm going to find exactly what I know is in here." He opened the glove compartment and began rifling through the contents. Registration documents, insurance papers, a small first aid kit, nothing unusual. But Henderson had come too far to back down now. His reputation, his authority, his very identity as a cop depended on this search yielding results. What Mills couldn't see from his angle was Henderson's left hand moving to his pocket. The practiced motion was so smooth, so rehearsed, that even if someone had been watching closely, they might have missed it. The small plastic baggie slipped from Henderson's pocket into his palm, then disappeared into the glove compartment among the papers. "Well, well, well," Henderson said, his voice taking on a theatrical quality. "What do we have here?" He emerged from the car holding the baggie of white powder, waving it triumphantly. "Looks like my nose was right after all, doesn't it, Mills?" Mills stared at the baggie in shock. He had been watching the entire time, and he was certain, absolutely certain, that Henderson had planted it. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His partner wasn't just aggressive or unprofessional. He was a criminal. Samantha turned slowly to face Henderson, her expression unreadable. "That's impossible. I've never seen that before in my life." "Sure you haven't," Henderson sneered. "That's what they all say." "Officer, that's not mine." "Officer, someone must have planted it. You people are all the same, never take responsibility for anything." He pulled out his handcuffs with a flourish, clearly enjoying the moment. This was his favorite part, the moment when reality crashed down on someone who thought they were above the law. "You're under arrest for possession of a controlled substance," Henderson announced loudly, apparently hoping neighbors might hear. "You have the right to remain silent, though I doubt you will." As the handcuffs clicked into place, Samantha's phone buzzed on the ground where Henderson had thrown it. The screen lit up with an incoming call from a number that would have changed everything if Henderson had bothered to look. DEA Emergency Response Team. But Henderson was too busy savoring his victory to notice. He had no idea that in exactly 4 minutes, his body camera would mysteriously malfunction. He had no idea that federal agents were already en route to his location, and he certainly had no idea that the woman he was arresting had the authority to end his career with a single phone call. The trap had been set months ago. Now it was finally springing shut. The ride to the station was a study in contrasts. Henderson sat in the front passenger seat, practically glowing with satisfaction as he radioed in his successful drug bust. In the back, behind the reinforced partition, Samantha Williams sat in handcuffs with an expression that would have puzzled anyone paying attention. She looked almost relieved. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. Henderson spoke into his radio with obvious pride. "We've got one in custody for possession. Clean bust. Drugs found in plain sight during a legitimate vehicle search." Mills gripped the steering wheel tighter with each word his partner spoke. The lie was so blatant, so rehearsed, that it made his stomach turn. He glanced in the rearview mirror at their arrestee, who was staring out the window with an odd sense of calm. "Copy that, Unit 47, dispatch responded. "Bring her in for processing." The Detroit Metropolitan Police Station buzzed with its usual afternoon activity. Officers processed paperwork, suspects waited in holding cells, and the machinery of law enforcement ground forward with mechanical precision. What none of them knew was that today would mark the beginning of the biggest corruption scandal in the department's history. Desk Sergeant Maria Rodriguez had seen thousands of arrests come through these doors. Drug dealers, thieves, domestic violence suspects. She'd processed them all with professional efficiency. But when Henderson walked in with his arrestee, something immediately struck her as unusual. The woman being led in handcuffs was impeccably dressed in a navy blazer that probably cost more than Rodriguez made in a week. Her posture was straight, confident, completely unlike the defeated slouch of most drug arrestees. And when their eyes met, Rodriguez saw something that gave her pause. This woman wasn't afraid. She was waiting. "What have we got, Henderson?" Rodriguez asked, pulling up the booking form on her computer. "Cocaine possession," Henderson announced loudly enough for half the station to hear. "Found it right in her glove compartment." "Another dealer thought she could run drugs through our neighborhoods." Rodriguez began the standard booking process. "Name?" "Samantha Williams," came the clear, professional response. "Address?" Samantha rattled off an address that made Rodriguez's fingers pause over the keyboard. She knew that area. Federal housing, government employees only. "Occupation?" There was the slightest pause before Samantha answered. "Federal employee." Henderson laughed dismissively. "Yeah, sure she is. Probably works at the post office or something." As Rodriguez continued the intake process, she began cataloging Samantha's personal effects. Expensive watch, high-quality leather purse, credit cards with no spending limits. And then, at the bottom of the purse, her fingers closed around something that made her blood run cold. A badge. Not just any badge. A federal badge with credentials that Rodriguez recognized immediately from her training. She pulled it out slowly, checking it against the federal identification card that accompanied it. "Henderson," Rodriguez called out, her voice suddenly urgent. "You need to see this." But Henderson was too busy regaling other officers with his story to pay attention. "Caught her red-handed," he was saying. "She tried to tell me she was some kind of federal employee. These people, they think if they lie big enough, we'll just believe them." Mills stood nearby, growing more uncomfortable by the minute. He watched Rodriguez examining something from the arrestee's purse, saw her face pale, saw her reach for her phone with hands that were suddenly shaking. "Henderson!" Rodriguez shouted across the station. "Get over here, now!" The urgency in her voice cut through Henderson's storytelling. He swaggered over, still riding high on his success. "What's got you all worked up, Rodriguez?" She held up the badge and identification. "Do you know what this is?" Henderson glanced at it dismissively. "Fake ID. They're getting better at making them these days." "It's not fake." Rodriguez's voice was barely above a whisper. "I ran it through the federal database. It's real." For the first time since the traffic stop began, Henderson's confidence wavered. "That's impossible." Rodriguez turned her computer screen toward him. The federal database was clear. Samantha Williams, Special Agent, Drug Enforcement Administration, active status, security clearance level that made Rodriguez's head spin. "Henderson," Rodriguez said slowly, "you just arrested a DEA agent." The color drained from Henderson's face. Around them, the station had grown quiet as other officers began to gather, drawn by the tension in Rodriguez's voice. Mills felt a mixture of vindication and terror wash over him. He'd known something was wrong with the stop, known his partner had planted evidence, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. Samantha sat in the holding area, still handcuffed, watching the drama unfold with professional interest. When she caught Mills' eye, she gave him the slightest nod, an acknowledgement that he had tried to do the right thing, even when it was difficult. Henderson was staring at the badge like it might bite him. There has to be some mistake. She can't be. I mean, look at her. Look at her what? Rodriguez's question hung in the air like a challenge. Before Henderson could answer, the station's main phone began ringing. Then another line. Then another. Federal agencies didn't wait for local police to figure things out on their own. The cavalry was coming. The first federal agents walked through the station doors at exactly 3:17 p.m. They moved with the quiet efficiency of people who didn't need to announce their authority. It radiated from every step they took. Special Agent Marcus Carter and Special Agent Patricia Brooks presented their credentials to the desk sergeant with practiced professionalism. Behind them, two more agents in dark suits waited by the entrance, their presence turning every head in the station. "We're here for Agent Williams," Carter announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent station. "We understand she's being held here." Henderson, who had been standing frozen by Rodriguez's desk for the past 10 minutes, finally found his voice. "Agent Williams? There's no agent here. We arrested a drug dealer named Samantha Williams." Chen turned slowly to face Henderson, his expression unreadable. "Officer Henderson, is it?" He consulted a tablet in his hand. "You arrested DEA Special Agent Samantha Williams at approximately 2:50 p.m. on charges of drug possession." "That's impossible," Henderson sputtered. "She's a drug dealer. I found cocaine in her car." Agent Brooks stepped forward, her voice ice cold. "Officer Henderson, Agent Williams has been working undercover for the past 8 months investigating corruption in this precinct." The important meeting she was driving to? That was a federal operation she was supposed to be overseeing. The words hit Henderson like physical blows. Around him, the station had gone completely silent except for the sound of phones ringing incessantly, federal agencies calling to inquire about their missing agent. Rodriguez pulled up Samantha's federal record on her computer, the full profile now visible with proper clearance codes that Carter had provided. Special Agent Samantha Williams, 12 years with the DEA, decorated for exceptional service, currently assigned to the Federal Anti-Corruption Task Force. "There has to be some mistake," Henderson repeated, his voice growing desperate. She was driving in a neighborhood where she didn't belong. She was acting suspicious. Acting suspicious? How? Carter's question was sharp. She was... Henderson floundered, realizing how his words would sound. She looked out of place. Mills, who had been watching from across the room, finally stepped forward. His voice was quiet but clear in the silent station. "Agent Carter, I need to report something. I witnessed Officer Henderson plant evidence in Agent Williams' vehicle." The statement landed like a bomb. Henderson spun around, his face flushing red. "What did you say?" "I saw you plant that cocaine," Mills repeated, his voice stronger now. "I watched you take it from your pocket and put it in her glove compartment." Henderson's world was collapsing in real time. "Mills, you don't know what you're talking about. You're confused. The stress of the situation—" "I'm not confused," Mills interrupted. "I've been documenting your behavior for months. The planted evidence, the falsified reports, the pattern of targeting black drivers. I have notes, dates, times. Agent Brooks was already on her phone, calling for a full federal investigation team. Agent Carter moved toward the holding area where Samantha had been waiting with remarkable patience. When he reached her, Samantha looked up with the first genuine smile she'd shown all day. "Marcus, about time." "Sorry we're late," Carter said as he unlocked her handcuffs. Traffic was murder. It was an old joke between them, but today it carried extra weight. As the handcuffs came off, Samantha rubbed her wrists and stood slowly, her professional composure intact despite everything she'd endured. "Agent Williams," Carter said formally, loud enough for the entire station to hear, "on behalf of the Drug Enforcement Administration and the Federal Anti-Corruption Task Force, I apologize for the treatment you've received here today." Henderson stared at Samantha as if seeing her for the first time. The woman he had dismissed, humiliated, and arrested was now being treated with the deference reserved for high-ranking federal officials. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. "You're really DEA?" he asked weakly. Samantha turned to face him directly for the first time since the arrest. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had earned every bit of respect she commanded. "Special Agent Samantha Williams, Drug Enforcement Administration, badge number 2847. I've been investigating corruption in this precinct for 8 months as part of a federal task force operation." She reached into her purse, now returned to her by a very nervous Rodriguez, and pulled out a second badge, this one bearing the seal of the Federal Anti-Corruption Task Force. "The operation you interrupted today was supposed to culminate months of work investigating police corruption in Detroit. Instead, you've provided us with the most clear-cut case of evidence planting and racial profiling we've seen in years." Henderson's legs felt weak. But you can't be... I mean... You mean what, Officer Henderson?" Samantha's question hung in the air like a challenge. Henderson's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The ugly truth of what he'd been about to say, what he'd been thinking all along, was written clearly across his face. Agent Brooks finished her phone call and approached the group. "Full investigative team is en route. Crime scene techs, internal affairs liaisons, and federal prosecutors. This precinct is about to be very busy." Captain Robert Walsh, who had been in a meeting when the federal agents arrived, finally emerged from his office. The sight that greeted him, federal agents, his officer being questioned, and a woman he now realized was a federal agent, made his blood pressure spike. "What the hell is going on in my station?" Agent Carter turned to face the captain. "Captain Walsh, I'm Special Agent Carter, DEA. We're here because one of your officers just arrested one of our agents and planted evidence on her." Walsh's face went pale. In his 25 years as a police officer, he had never faced anything like this. Federal investigations, planted evidence, corruption charges. This was career-ending territory for everyone involved. Samantha watched the chaos unfold around her with professional detachment. This was exactly what she had been sent here to expose: the casual racism, the abuse of power, the willingness to destroy innocent lives to maintain a false sense of authority. But what struck her most was Officer Mills, standing off to the side, clearly struggling with what he had witnessed. In all the corruption and abuse, there was still someone willing to tell the truth, even when it was difficult. The federal investigation would expose years of systematic corruption. 23 wrongful convictions would be overturned. Officer Henderson's career would end in disgrace and criminal charges. But right now, in this moment, justice was just beginning. The Detroit Metropolitan Police Station transformed overnight into what resembled a federal crime scene. Yellow tape cordoned off sections of the building, FBI evidence technicians dusted surfaces for fingerprints, and federal investigators conducted interviews in every available room. Captain Walsh had barely slept. By 6 a.m. the following morning, his station was crawling with agents from the DEA, FBI, and the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. The media had gotten wind of the story, and news vans lined the street outside like vultures waiting for a feeding. Internal Affairs Detective Sarah Martinez had seen plenty of corruption cases in her 15-year career, but nothing quite like this. The evidence was overwhelming, the implications staggering, and the scope of potential damage kept expanding with each interview she conducted. Henderson sat across from her in interview room 2, his union lawyer beside him, looking like a man who had aged 10 years overnight. His hands shook slightly as he reached for a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. "Let's go through this one more time, Officer Henderson," Martinez said, her voice professionally neutral. "You approached Agent Williams's vehicle at approximately 2:47 p.m. yesterday. Walk me through exactly what happened." Henderson's lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named David Kellerman, leaned forward. "My client has already answered these questions multiple times. And he'll continue answering them until we get the truth," Martinez replied calmly. She opened a thick file folder. "Because right now, Officer Henderson's version of events doesn't match the physical evidence, the dashboard camera footage, or witness testimony." In the folder were photographs that made Henderson's stomach turn, high-resolution images from the dashboard camera enhanced by federal technicians showing his movements around Agent Williams's vehicle. Frame by frame, they told a story that contradicted everything he had claimed. "Frame 47, Martinez said, sliding a photo across the table. "Your left hand is clearly visible reaching into your pocket. Frame 52, your hand emerges with what appears to be a small object. Frame 61, your hand enters the glove compartment." Henderson stared at the photos as if they were written in a foreign language. "Those pictures don't prove anything. I was conducting a legitimate search." "Frame 73, Martinez continued relentlessly. "Your hand exits the glove compartment, now empty. Frame 89, you discover the same object you placed there 28 frames earlier." The evidence was devastating in its clarity. Federal technicians had analyzed every frame of footage from multiple cameras, the patrol car's dashboard cam, body cameras from both officers, and even a doorbell camera from a house across the street that had captured the entire incident. Kellerman shifted uncomfortably. He had advised dozens of officers over the years, but he had never seen evidence this conclusive. "Detective Martinez, perhaps we could discuss a plea arrangement." "Not yet," Martinez interrupted, "because this isn't just about one planted baggie of cocaine. This is about a pattern." She opened another folder, this one significantly thicker. "Officer Henderson, in the past 5 years, you've made 127 drug-related arrests. Federal investigators have now examined every single one of them." Henderson's face went white. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that 89 of those arrests show suspicious patterns, similar language in reports, evidence found in identical locations, suspects who all seem to say the exact same things during arrest." Martinez spread out a series of arrest reports across the table. The similarities were striking, almost as if Henderson had been using a template, changing only names and dates. "Maria Gonzalez, arrested March 15, 2023. Cocaine found in glove compartment during routine traffic stop. James Washington, arrested June 3, 2023. Cocaine found in glove compartment during routine traffic stop. Angela Rodriguez, arrested September 12, 2023. Cocaine found in—" "Stop," Henderson whispered. "I can't stop," Martinez said. "Because there are 86 more just like these. 86 people who are sitting in prison right now because you decided they looked guilty." The door opened, and Agent Carter entered with Officer Mills. Mills looked haggard but determined. Over the past 18 hours, he had provided federal investigators with a detailed account of everything he had witnessed during his 6 months as Henderson's partner. "Officer Mills has been very helpful," Carter announced. "He's provided us with dates, times, and detailed descriptions of at least 15 incidents where he witnessed questionable behavior." Mills couldn't meet Henderson's eyes. "I should have reported it sooner." "I know that. But I was scared, and I thought maybe I was wrong about what I was seeing." You weren't wrong, Martinez said gently. And your testimony is going to help free innocent people. Henderson finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Mills, you son of a bitch. We were partners. Exactly, Mills shot back, finding his courage. We were partners, and I watched you destroy innocent people's lives for sport. I watched you plant evidence, falsify reports, and laugh about it afterward. Chen pulled out a recording device. Officer Mills, would you please tell Detective Martinez about the conversation you recorded last month? Mills nodded, his hands shaking slightly. Henderson didn't know I was recording, but he started bragging about his perfect record with drug arrests. He said, and I quote, "The trick is making sure they can't prove it didn't belong to them. A little cocaine goes a long way toward teaching respect." The recording played in the small room, Henderson's voice clear and unmistakable. These people think they can drive through our neighborhoods like they own the place. A little wake-up call in county lockup usually adjusts their attitude. Henderson's lawyer closed his briefcase with a sharp snap. I need to confer with my client privately. But Martinez wasn't finished. Officer Henderson, there's something else you need to know. Agent Williams wasn't just a random DEA agent. She was specifically assigned to investigate you. Henderson looked up sharply. What? The federal task force received multiple complaints about your arrest patterns over the past 2 years. Agent Williams volunteered to work undercover in this area specifically to gather evidence of your corruption. Chen nodded. Agent Williams has been documenting police behavior in this precinct for 8 months. Your traffic stop yesterday was the culmination of a federal investigation that began when we noticed the statistical impossibility of your arrest record. What do you mean? Kellerman asked. Martinez pulled out a statistical analysis prepared by federal data experts. Officer Henderson arrests black drivers for drug possession at a rate 847% higher than any other officer in this precinct. The mathematical probability of this being random is essentially 0. The numbers were damning. Charts and graphs showed arrest patterns that could only be explained by systematic targeting based on race. Henderson had been so consistent in his bias that he had created a statistical signature that caught federal attention. Moreover, Carter continued, Agent Williams was carrying a federal tracking device yesterday. We have GPS data showing that she was driving normally, obeying all traffic laws, when you initiated the stop. There was no legitimate reason for the traffic stop. Henderson slumped in his chair. The weight of evidence was crushing. Video footage, audio recordings, statistical analysis, witness testimony, and now GPS data. There was no defense, no explanation that would hold up in court. In light of this evidence, Martinez announced, the Detroit Police Department is terminating Officer Henderson's employment effective immediately. Criminal charges are being filed by federal prosecutors for civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. She turned to Mills. Officer Mills, your cooperation in this investigation has been invaluable. The department recognizes that coming forward took courage. Mills nodded, but his expression remained troubled. What about the people Henderson arrested? The innocent ones sitting in prison? Chan answered, Federal prosecutors are reviewing every case. We expect at least 23 convictions to be overturned immediately, with more under investigation. Each person wrongfully convicted will be released and will be eligible for federal compensation. The room fell silent except for the sound of Henderson's labored breathing. 12 years of corruption, dozens of innocent lives destroyed, and an entire community's trust betrayed. All because one officer believed his badge gave him the right to play judge and jury. Officer Henderson, Martinez said formally, you have the right to make a statement. Do you wish to address the victims of your actions? Henderson looked up, his eyes meeting hers for the first time since the interview began. For a moment, it seemed like he might show some remorse, some recognition of the pain he had caused. Instead, he turned to his lawyer. I want to make a deal. Even in defeat, Henderson couldn't bring himself to acknowledge the humanity of the people he had wronged. It was a final confirmation of everything Agent Williams had suspected about his character. The investigation would continue for months, unraveling years of systematic corruption. But the core truth was already clear. Justice delayed is not justice denied, especially when someone with courage decides to stand up and demand better. 3 months later, the Wayne County Courthouse buzzed with unprecedented activity. Federal prosecutors had moved quickly, and Officer Bradley Henderson's case had become a symbol of everything wrong with policing in America, and everything that could go right when the system actually worked. Henderson stood before Federal Judge Patricia Morrison, his police uniform replaced by an orange jumpsuit. The man who had once swaggered through traffic stops with absolute authority now looked diminished, broken by the weight of his crimes finally catching up with him. "Mr. Henderson," Judge Morrison began, her voice carrying the gravity of the moment, "you have pled guilty to 47 counts of civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. Before I pass sentence, I want you to understand the scope of what you've done." She gestured to the gallery, packed with people whose lives Henderson had destroyed. Maria Gonzalez sat in the front row, the single mother who had lost her job and nearly lost her children when Henderson planted drugs in her car. James Washington was there too, the college student whose scholarship had been revoked after Henderson's false arrest derailed his education. 23 people served prison time because of your actions, Judge Morrison continued. Families were torn apart, dreams were shattered, lives were destroyed, not by criminals but by someone sworn to protect and serve. Agent Samantha Williams sat in the back of the courtroom, watching justice finally unfold. Beside her, Officer Mills, now Sergeant Mills after his promotion for courage in reporting corruption, shifted nervously. This was his first time seeing Henderson since the investigation began. The plea agreement had been straightforward. Henderson would serve 18 months in federal prison, forfeit his pension, and be permanently barred from law enforcement. In exchange, he would cooperate fully with ongoing investigations and make a public apology to his victims. "Mr. Henderson," Judge Morrison said, "you have the opportunity to address the people you've wronged. I encourage you to take it." Henderson rose slowly, his hands shaking as he approached the microphone. The man who had once commanded traffic stops with racist arrogance now struggled to find words. He began, then stopped. The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of his breathing. "I want to say that I'm sorry for what I did." His voice was barely above a whisper. "I know that doesn't undo the harm I caused. I know saying sorry doesn't give back the time people spent in prison or fix the damage to their lives." Maria Gonzalez wiped tears from her eyes. She had waited 3 months to hear those words. "I was wrong," Henderson continued, his voice growing stronger. "I was wrong about everything. I let my prejudices control my actions, and I destroyed innocent people's lives because of it." He turned to face the gallery directly. "To Maria Gonzalez, James Washington, Angela Rodriguez, and all the others, I am deeply, truly sorry. You deserved better from me, and you deserved better from the system I represented." Judge Morrison nodded approvingly. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. "Bradley Henderson," she announced, "I sentence you to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised probation. You will forfeit all pension benefits and are permanently prohibited from working in law enforcement." The gavel came down with finality. Henderson was led away in handcuffs, his career and reputation destroyed by his own actions. Outside the courthouse, Agent Williams spoke to a crowd of reporters. "This case proves that the system can work when good people refuse to stay silent. Officer Mills showed extraordinary courage in coming forward, and that courage saved lives." Sergeant Mills stood beside her, still uncomfortable with the attention, but committed to the change he had helped bring about. "I should have spoken up sooner," he told the cameras. but I hope other officers will learn from my mistake. When you see wrongdoing, you have to act. That's what the badge really means. The Detroit Police Department had implemented sweeping reforms in the wake of the Henderson scandal. Mandatory body cameras that couldn't be disabled, bias training for all officers, a civilian oversight board with real authority, community policing initiatives designed to rebuild trust. Captain Walsh, who had survived the investigation but accepted early retirement, was replaced by Captain Jennifer Carter, Agent Carter's sister and a reform-minded leader committed to transparency. The 23 people wrongfully convicted by Henderson's corruption were not only freed but received federal compensation totaling $4.2 million. More importantly, their records were expunged, their dignity restored. As Agent Williams walked down the courthouse steps, she reflected on the long road that had brought them here. Justice had been delayed, but it had not been denied. The system had bent under the weight of corruption, but it had not broken. Change was possible. Reform was achievable. And sometimes, all it took was one person willing to stand up and say, "This is wrong, and it stops here." 2 years have passed since that traffic stop changed everything. The ripple effects continue to spread through Detroit and beyond, proving that accountability isn't just possible. It's essential. Agent Samantha Williams returned to her regular DEA duties, but her work in Detroit didn't end with Henderson's conviction. She now leads federal training programs, teaching other agents how to identify and investigate police corruption. Her experience has become a blueprint for similar investigations in 12 other cities. People ask me if I'm angry about what happened, Samantha reflects during a recent interview. The truth is, I'm grateful. Grateful that we caught it. Grateful that good officers like Mills found their courage. Grateful that the system worked the way it was supposed to work. Sergeant Robert Mills has become something of a legend in progressive policing circles. His willingness to report his partner's corruption didn't make him popular with old-school officers, but it earned him respect where it mattered most, in the community he serves. The police department he works for today looks nothing like the one where Henderson thrived. Body cameras are mandatory and tamper-proof. Every traffic stop is recorded and reviewed. Community oversight isn't just welcomed, it's required. The hardest part wasn't reporting Henderson, Mills explains to rookie officers during training sessions. The hardest part was living with myself when I stayed silent. Don't make my mistake. Speak up when you see wrongdoing because that badge doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the community that trusts you with it. The 23 people wrongfully convicted by Henderson have moved on with their lives, but their stories serve as powerful reminders of what's at stake when we allow corruption to flourish. Maria Gonzalez returned to school and became a paralegal, dedicating her career to helping others navigate the justice system. James Washington finished his degree and now works as a community organizer, fighting for police reform. The statistical change in Detroit has been remarkable. Complaints against police have dropped by 67%. Community trust in law enforcement has risen to levels not seen in decades. Use of force incidents are down 43%, and officer retention is up as good cops no longer have to choose between their conscience and their career. But perhaps the most important change is harder to measure. It's in the way officers approach their work now, knowing that accountability isn't just a policy, it's a promise. It's in the way community members interact with police, no longer assuming the worst, but still holding them to the highest standards. Henderson was released from federal prison last month after serving his full sentence. He works now at a warehouse outside Detroit, his law enforcement career permanently behind him. The system he once corrupted has moved on without him, stronger for having faced its flaws honestly. The story of that traffic stop has been told thousands of times, in training academies, community meetings, and congressional hearings. Each telling carries the same message. Change is possible when good people refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. Agent Williams puts it best. That badge, that uniform, that authority, it's all borrowed. Borrowed from the community that trusts you to do better. When you forget that, you lose everything that matters. The work continues. Police reform isn't a destination. It's an ongoing journey that requires constant vigilance, continuous improvement, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. But if one traffic stop could expose decades of corruption and spark meaningful change, imagine what's possible when we all commit to demanding better from the institutions that serve us. So I ask you, what assumptions have you made about people based on nothing more than appearance? When you see injustice happening, do you speak up or stay silent? And how can we work together to build a system that truly serves everyone equally? The conversation doesn't end here. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe to Blacktail's Stories for more stories that matter. Because change happens when we refuse to look away from difficult truths. Justice delayed doesn't have to mean justice denied, but only if we're willing to fight for it.